The alien world of Varixis was once a quiet, relatively untouched corner of the galaxy, home to a species known as the Krakener, a technologically advanced but fiercely isolationist race. The Krakener were known for their cold logic, their mastery of interstellar travel, and their strict code of honor. They had little interest in the affairs of the galaxy outside their borders, preferring to watch from the shadows as the universe spun around them. But everything changed the day they encountered a single human. The Krakener had observed humanity from afar, noting their rapid technological advancements and the rumors surrounding their violent, unpredictable nature. The Krakener, having dealt with other alien species for millennia, were accustomed to the idea of warlike races, but humans seemed to be different. Their resourcefulness, adaptability, and the sheer chaos that surrounded them made the Krakener nervous. Still, they considered humanity to be just another species, one they could handle if the need arose. But they were wrong. The Krakener had discovered a small, isolated human colony on the edge of their territory, and the Krakener's curiosity, combined with their innate suspicion of outsiders, led them to launch a covert mission to assess the humans. A small team of Krakener scouts infiltrated the colony, blending in with the environment, hoping to observe these so-called angry humans without being detected. One human, a woman named Serena Hale, had taken notice of the strange movements in the shadows. She was no ordinary human. A former soldier turned explorer, Serena had been part of several dangerous missions in the farthest reaches of human space. Her training had taught her how to spot the slightest irregularity, how to listen to the quiet hum of the universe and recognize when something was off. She confronted the Krakener scouts, her sharp instincts guiding her every move. The Krakener, unused to humans being so alert, saw her as a threat. They tried to neutralize her quickly, but Serena was faster. She fought with a brutal efficiency that only humans could possess, a mix of raw physicality and calculated unpredictability. The Krakener scouts underestimated her, thinking they could easily overpower her with their advanced technology and strength. They were wrong. Serena, despite being outnumbered, fought back with sheer ferocity. She used the environment to her advantage, leading them into traps they hadn't expected, causing the ground beneath them to collapse, and manipulating the terrain in ways the Krakener couldn't anticipate. With each move, Serena's survival instinct drove her deeper into the fight, and the Krakener began to realize something: they had never faced an adversary like this before. In the end, Serena killed 2 of the Krakener scouts before she was able to escape with vital intelligence. The Krakener, ashamed at their failure, quickly retaliated. They invaded the human colony, expecting to crush it with the same cold precision they had used against countless other species. They assumed that the death of one human would be a simple matter, just another body to add to their list of conquests. But as they began their attack, they found themselves quickly overwhelmed. The humans had not been idle. Serena had sent a distress signal before escaping, and within hours, reinforcements arrived. A full human military strike force, equipped with cutting-edge technology, descended upon the Krakener invaders with a singular mission: retaliation. The Krakener, for all their strength and technology, were unprepared for the kind of fury humanity unleashed. They were not prepared for the swiftness of human warfare, the tactics honed from centuries of conflict. Human soldiers, driven by the anger of seeing one of their own killed, fought not with calculated precision, but with a raw, primal determination that stunned the Krakener. The Krakener quickly learned their mistake. Their technology, though advanced, was no match for the sheer unpredictability and adaptability of human warfare. The Krakener had assumed that one human was nothing more than a small problem to solve, but they quickly found that humans were not so easily broken. Each human soldier fought with a kind of savage ingenuity that the Krakener had never encountered before. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle, no matter the odds. Within hours, the Krakener forces began to retreat, their plans in shambles. They had been outmaneuvered at every turn, their tactics outsmarted by humans who fought with reckless abandon and an unpredictable mindset. In the chaos of the battle, the Krakener realized that they had severely misjudged humanity. What they had failed to understand was that humans, though often seen as emotional and prone to anger, were far more than their impulses. The Krakener had seen humanity's rage as a weakness, but it was their strength. Humans could channel that anger into focus, turning it into a weapon that no alien force, however advanced, could predict. The regret of the Krakener. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving Krakener leaders convened, looking at the wreckage of their failed invasion. They had been forced to retreat, humiliated by their own overconfidence. The Krakener had long considered themselves the pinnacle of intelligence and power in the galaxy, but one human had shattered that illusion. As the Krakener leaders sat in silence, they began to understand the full extent of their mistake. They had killed one human, but in doing so, they had awakened a force they were not prepared for, a force that had, for the first time, made the Krakener feel vulnerable. They had underestimated not just Serena Hale, but the entire human species. They had encountered a species that, when pushed, could fight with a ferocity and adaptability that no amount of technology or strategy could account for. The Krakener realized they had done something they never should have done. They had provoked a species that was willing to fight to the death, not just to survive, but to avenge their own. In the quiet of their retreat, the Krakener leaders made a solemn vow: never again would they underestimate humanity. The galaxy would never be the same after that day. The Krakener learned the hard way that humans were not a species to be toyed with. Anger, when channeled correctly, could be a power unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. And as the Krakener retreated into the shadows, humanity stood tall, a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in the most unexpected places. And the Krakener? They quickly regretted killing that one human. The ripple effect was far greater than they could have ever imagined. After the failed invasion and the humiliating retreat, the Krakener were forced to reassess their entire approach to the galaxy. The one thing they hadn't expected, the thing they had completely underestimated, was the sheer unpredictability of humanity. The Krakener had always believed themselves to be masters of order and control, beings who could predict and dictate the flow of events with precision. But humans, as the Krakener learned firsthand, were anything but predictable. Serena Hale had been only one human, but in the grand scheme of things, she represented something much greater. She embodied the essence of humanity: relentless, resourceful, and capable of bending the rules of combat and survival to an almost supernatural degree. Her actions had sent a shockwave through the Krakener leadership, and now that shockwave was spreading throughout the galaxy. News of the Krakener's failed invasion spread quickly, carried on the tides of galactic communications. The Krakener Empire, once a towering figure of power, now faced not only internal shame but external scrutiny. Other alien species, some of which had long been wary of the Krakener's dominance, began to look at the incident through a new lens. One species, the Ziller, a race of giant, telepathic creatures that specialized in psychic warfare, had always kept their distance from the Krakener. They admired their technology but kept themselves neutral in galactic politics. However, after the Krakener's blunder, the Ziller began to see humanity as a potential new force to contend with. What could a species so young and wild accomplish with the right guidance? The Ziller saw in humanity an opportunity to forge alliances, to perhaps even sway the course of galactic events. On the other hand, some factions that had once feared the Krakener Empire began to feel emboldened. The Rilnathi, a peaceful yet fiercely protective race, had lived under the Krakener's thumb for centuries. They had quietly suffered, oppressed by the Krakener's technological superiority. But the tide was turning. The Rilnathi now began to send messages of hope and solidarity to humanity, urging them to stand up to the Krakener, to show them that the old empires were no longer invincible. They recognized that humanity, though young, might be the key to breaking free of their chains. Humanity's awakening. Back on Earth, the human race had been watching the developments unfold with a mixture of trepidation and awe. At first, many had believed the Krakener's attack on the colony was a mere skirmish, an isolated incident in the greater war of the galaxy. But as the news of the Krakener's retreat and the sudden rallying of other alien races reached Earth, something began to shift. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. Humanity had taken their first steps into the galaxy, and they were being noticed, for better or worse. Humanity's military leaders, already battle-tested from past encounters with alien species, realized the potential before them. This was their moment to assert themselves. Earth's government quickly dispatched a fleet to establish a presence in the region of space that had been the site of the Krakener invasion. The Krakener might have been strong, but humanity was starting to realize that their greatest asset was not just their anger, it was their unity. The ability to come together, to act as one, when pushed to the brink, was something no alien species had fully grasped. It made humanity unpredictable. And that unpredictability was their greatest weapon. Humanity's united forces began to expand their presence in the galaxy, sending ambassadors to meet with alien species who had once been hesitant to approach them. The alliances that began to form were unprecedented. Former enemies, seeing humanity's boldness and resilience, began to reevaluate their stance. Some even joined in efforts to stand against the Krakener Empire. The Zillar, intrigued by humanity's potential, offered their psychic expertise to bolster human strategic planning. Meanwhile, the Renethi, seeing humanity as a beacon of hope, provided their vast knowledge of subspace technologies to aid in faster-than-light travel. But even as humanity's alliances expanded, their thirst for vengeance was not easily sated. The anger that had been simmering for decades, the quiet rage at having been cast aside by the greater galaxy, now began to take root in the hearts of many human soldiers. They had seen what had happened to Serena Hale, and they saw the Krakener as a symbol of the larger forces that had oppressed humanity for so long. But they didn't want to simply defeat the Krakener. They wanted to send a message. It was one thing to defeat an enemy in battle, but it was something entirely different to force that enemy to regret ever crossing you. The Krakener's dilemma. Back on Krakener's homeworld, the Empire's leaders were in a state of panic. They had long prided themselves on their strategic brilliance, their ability to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies, but humanity had changed the game. The Krakener began to understand the deep mistake they had made. They had thought that one human would be just one insignificant life to take, one small ripple in the galactic pond. But Serena Hale's death had ignited something within humanity, a collective, simmering rage that united them in ways the Krakener could never have predicted. For the first time in centuries, the Krakener found themselves on the defensive, not because of superior weapons, but because of a species driven by an emotion they could not manipulate. Humanity's rage was something the Krakener could not control, and worse, it spread like wildfire. The humiliation was palpable. The Krakener had underestimated the power of the human spirit. Desperate to salvage the situation, the Krakener attempted to reach out diplomatically, offering reparations, a ceasefire, and even a formal apology to humanity. They were hoping to de-escalate tensions, fearing that further conflict would lead to their total annihilation at the hands of a species they had not prepared for. They reached out to Earth's leaders, asking for negotiations. But it was already too late. Humanity had tasted power. The Krakener could no longer dictate the terms of their future. The final reckoning. Humanity's fleets, now bolstered by their new allies, amassed at the borders of Krakener space. It wasn't just a show of strength, it was a statement. They weren't going to back down. Serena Hale's memory, her sacrifice, had become a rallying cry for the humans, a symbol of their collective will. The Krakener, for all their technological might, had never had to face an enemy that fought with such a fierce, united resolve. The final battle was unlike anything the Krakener had ever faced. It wasn't just a war of firepower, it was a war of ideologies. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to make sure they would never be underestimated again. The battle raged across the stars, a struggle between ancient arrogance and the relentless human will to be free. In the end, the Krakener surrendered. But it wasn't out of weakness, it was out of sheer respect. They had realized that humanity wasn't just a species to be dismissed, a species to be conquered. The Krakener had been forced to confront the fact that humans, for all their flaws and volatility, were a force of nature, one they couldn't control, and one they couldn't simply destroy. Humanity had become the galaxy's new power. And no one, not even the Krakener, would ever forget the price of underestimating them. The conclusion of the Krakener War was a pivotal moment for the galaxy. Humanity's swift and decisive victory over the once feared Krakener Empire sent shockwaves throughout the known universe. It wasn't just a military triumph, it was a testament to the power of unity, anger channeled into resolve, and a determination that no species, no matter how technologically advanced, could break. As the Krakener forces withdrew and their leaders were forced into an uneasy peace, the galaxy began to shift in ways no one could have anticipated. The once unassailable Krakener were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The balance of power had irrevocably changed. And in the vacuum left by their fall, humanity found itself thrust into a new role, a leader among the stars. However, the victory came at a cost. The human military had fought fiercely, losing countless lives in the battle to push the Krakener back. While humanity stood tall, the scars of the war ran deep. There was no denying the emotional and physical toll the conflict had taken, and as the war concluded, the soldiers, the leaders, and the civilians who had fought for survival now had to ask themselves one critical question: what comes next? The United Galactic Coalition. In the wake of their victory, humanity's leaders realized that they could not simply conquer and leave it at that. As much as the galaxy had trembled at humanity's wrath, it also feared the potential for tyranny. For all their anger, humanity had fought not for dominion but for freedom from the oppressive reign of old empires. This was a key distinction, one that they had to make clear to the galaxy's remaining species. The United Galactic Coalition, UGC, was born a formalized assembly of all the galaxy's species who wished to build something new. Humanity's rise to power wasn't going to be about building an empire, it was about fostering cooperation and ensuring that no one species ever had to submit to the tyranny of another again. The UGC was formed as a means to enforce peace, promote collaboration, and, most importantly, protect the rights of every species within its borders. At the head of this new council, human leaders took their place, not because they sought to dominate, but because they were seen as a unifying force, capable of guiding the galaxy away from the path of endless war. Their strength, forged through countless struggles, had made them the right species to spearhead this new era. It was a role they accepted with humility, knowing full well that the power they wielded had been earned through sacrifice. However, not all species within the UGC were fully on board with humanity's leadership. Some, like the Ziller, still questioned humanity's ability to hold the delicate balance of power that had so far kept the galaxy from descending into chaos. The Ziller, though fascinated by humanity's potential, still considered their unrestrained emotion and impulsive decisions to be a dangerous flaw. Other species, such as the Praxians, a race of insectoid beings with a long history of isolationism, feared that the human thirst for vengeance might return, threatening their peaceful existence. Despite these fears, there was a powerful undercurrent of hope that ran through the coalition, a belief that humanity, for all their faults, could bring about lasting peace if given the chance. Whispers in the dark. Yet not all species were content with the newfound status quo. In the shadowy corners of the galaxy, a faction had begun to emerge, one that had watched the Krakeners' defeat closely and saw in humanity's rise an opportunity for power. They were known as the Ascendants, a loose coalition of rogue factions, dissatisfied with the UGC's fragile peace. The Ascendants had one objective: to unseat humanity and return the galaxy to the age of empire building, where strength and domination ruled supreme. The Ascendants, unlike the Krakener, did not rely on overwhelming force. Instead, they operated through subterfuge, using the growing mistrust between species to sow discord. They spread rumors, fabricated stories of human atrocities, and attempted to exploit the fears of the galaxy's less secure species, planting seeds of doubt about humanity's true intentions. Their ultimate goal was simple: they believed that only by returning to a galaxy ruled by fear could the true strength of any species be realized. They sought to divide the UGC and undermine humanity's leadership at every turn. Humanity faces new tests. For the first time since their victory over the Krakener, humanity found itself facing an internal crisis. Despite their success, the divisions within the UGC began to widen. Not all the species were happy with human dominance, even in a cooperative sense. Some still clung to the ideals of the old empires, where races ruled over others. Humanity's insistence on peace and equality was seen by some as weakness, and others began to rally against it. The UGC found itself in a delicate situation, caught between the desire to uphold the ideals of unity and the reality that old grudges were hard to forget. While humanity pushed for a future based on collaboration, there were those who still saw strength only in force. Even among human leaders, there were divisions. Some wanted a more aggressive stance toward the Ascendants, while others advocated for diplomacy and negotiation. As tensions rose within the UGC, Serena Hale's legacy became a beacon for those who believed humanity's strength lay in its ability to unite and adapt. But for some, it was a reminder that when pushed too far, humanity's anger could burn brightly enough to scorch the entire galaxy. The Ascendant plot unfolds. Unbeknownst to humanity, the Ascendants had begun to infiltrate critical sectors of the UGC. Factions sympathetic to their cause had already begun to sabotage key trade routes, leaking classified information, and staging false flag operations to turn the galaxy's species against humanity. They played on the same primal fears that had motivated the Krakeners' failed invasion. The Ascendants knew that humanity's greatest strength was its unity, but they also understood that unity was fragile. If they could manipulate the galaxy's factions into mistrusting one another, they could break apart the coalition and bring the galaxy to the brink of war again. As the Ascendants quietly stoked the flames of division, the human leadership found itself faced with a dilemma. Could they keep the fragile peace intact, or would the galaxy's history of empire building drag them into another war? The echoes of the past, of old rivalries, of old enemies, began to reverberate once more. Humanity, for all its progress, was not yet free of the ghosts of the old empires. And if they couldn't stop the Ascendants, they might soon find themselves fighting not just for survival, but for the very future of the galaxy. The true test of humanity. In this new phase of galactic history, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet, the chance to prove that their victory over the Krakener wasn't just a fluke, but the beginning of a new era. An era where anger could be channeled not into destruction, but into hope, unity, and lasting peace. The Ascendants were coming, and with them, the old ghosts of empire. The question now was whether humanity could continue to lead the galaxy with the same resolve and ingenuity that had turned the tide against the Krakener, or whether the mistakes of the past would catch up with them. As the political landscape of the galaxy teetered on the edge of collapse, humanity found itself thrust into a battle unlike any it had faced before. The Ascendant's subtle manipulation of interstellar politics had begun to work. Distrust, suspicion, and fear began to spread like wildfire. The fragile peace humanity had worked so hard to build was starting to fracture. Alien factions who had once embraced the ideals of unity now whispered about the inevitable return of old powers, while others openly questioned humanity's ability to lead. The memory of humanity's brutal vengeance against the Krakener was still fresh, and for some, it was a reminder of the species' dangerous unpredictability. Human leaders found themselves struggling to maintain the coalition's unity. Each passing day brought new revelations of sabotage, disinformation, and covert military actions orchestrated by the Ascendants. Their agents had infiltrated key positions within the UGC, poisoning relationships between species and driving wedges between human diplomats and their allies. Each plot seemed more sophisticated than the last, and no one knew exactly how deep the Ascendants' network stretched. Humanity's reputation, built on hard-won victories, was slowly being chipped away, and their enemies, old and new, sensed an opportunity. The Council at a crossroads. The United Galactic Coalition convened a summit, a desperate attempt to restore order before the galaxy plunged back into chaos. Representatives from every faction, from the enigmatic Ziller to the peaceful Renethy, gathered in a vast chamber aboard the newly constructed flagship of humanity, the USS Concordia. The tension in the room was palpable. Each species brought with them a deep-rooted fear of the unknown. Humanity's rise had been sudden and unstoppable, and many began to wonder, had the human species truly evolved beyond the cycles of war, or was this just the beginning of a new galactic empire? As the meeting unfolded, it became clear that the Ascendants had succeeded in one thing: humanity's enemies were no longer afraid of the Krakener, they were afraid of humanity's growing power. The galaxy was on the brink of a full-scale civil war, one that could drag every species into the conflict. The UGC had become fractured, and trust was at an all-time low. Humanity's representatives, including General Miriam Stroud, the leader of the human military forces, and Ambassador Jackson Hale, the brother of the fallen Serena Hale, did their best to keep the peace. They argued that the Ascendant's influence was the true enemy, and they called for unity against this common threat. But even as they spoke, the cracks in the coalition widened. The Praxians, still reeling from centuries of isolation, grew increasingly distrustful of human motives, while the Tesseract, a species of telekinetic warriors, began openly questioning the UGC's ability to maintain control over such a vast and diverse galaxy. "Can you honestly say," demanded Ambassador Isha Tyrell of the Tesseract, her voice laced with distrust, "that your species has truly left behind the hunger for power that drove the Krakener? The galaxy is watching. If you fail us now, the consequences will be catastrophic." General Stroud's expression hardened, and her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "We're not here to rule," she said, her voice steady. "We're here to ensure peace. We're here to stop the Ascendants before they tear this galaxy apart." The emergence of the Ascendants. While the diplomatic summit raged on, the Ascendants moved in the shadows. Their leaders, a coalition of rogue former military commanders, corporate magnates, and disgruntled former members of the galactic aristocracy, had been planning for years. They had anticipated the rise of humanity, and now that the human species had achieved military and political dominance, they sought to exploit the inherent fears and weaknesses in the new galactic order. The Ascendants were led by Archon Xerix, a brilliant tactician once believed to have been lost during the Krakener conflict. Xerix's strategic mind had been a driving force behind the Ascendants' rise to power. Where others saw chaos, Xerix saw opportunity. His ultimate goal wasn't just the destruction of humanity, it was the creation of a new order where only the strongest species would thrive. And Xerix had already begun to rally the forces that would reshape the galaxy. Through covert operations, Xerix had forged alliances with factions that felt alienated by the UGC's ideals of peace and cooperation. The Eclori, a ruthless mercenary faction of genetically enhanced warriors, pledged their loyalty in exchange for future military dominance. Meanwhile, the Veldari, a race of cunning and manipulative strategists, had been secretly funding Ascendant operations, eager to see the UGC fall into disarray so they could rise as a new power. The Ascendants, using their network of agents, began to implement a series of coordinated attacks. Sabotaging trade routes, destabilizing key military strongholds, and planting misinformation that turned former allies against each other, their plan was to provoke a war that humanity could not hope to control. The first major attack. The first true test came when the Ascendants launched a direct assault on one of humanity's most critical assets, the Lunar Forge, a massive space station orbiting Earth that served as a production hub for advanced weaponry and military ships. The attack was swift, brutal, and devastating. Humanity had not anticipated such a direct confrontation so soon. The Ascendants deployed a well-coordinated fleet of stealth ships that bypassed human defenses, slipping past the patrols of the newly formed UGC Defense Fleet. The Eclori mercenaries led the charge, using their superior combat training and technological enhancements to cut through humanity's defenses. The Veldari, with their advanced psi-ops capabilities, manipulated the minds of key defense officers, causing confusion and chaos among human ranks. The station was breached, and the Ascendants quickly moved to steal critical technologies, preparing to unleash a new kind of warfare that humanity had never encountered. The attack on the Lunar Forge sent a ripple of fear across the galaxy. The Ascendants were no longer a distant threat. They were here, and they were deadly. And humanity, despite all its power and triumphs, had been caught off guard. The human response. Within hours of the attack, General Stroud called for immediate action. The UGC fleet, now under human command, mobilized, and reinforcements were sent to the Lunar Forge. But the damage was done. Humanity had suffered a major loss, and the message was clear: the Ascendants were not going to back down. They were testing humanity's resolve, trying to provoke a response that would fracture the already fragile coalition. Ambassador Hale, now more determined than ever, addressed the UGC Council. "This is it," he said. "The Ascendants want us to crumble. They want us to react with rage and fear. But we must hold our ground. The only way to win this war is not through vengeance, but through unity. We must show the galaxy that humanity stands for something greater than the thirst for power. We stand for the future." But the divisions were growing deeper. The Eclori mercenaries, with their brutal efficiency, represented the opposite of everything humanity had worked for. Some factions within the UGC began to question whether humanity's idealism was enough to defeat such ruthless, aggressive foes. A new war begins. The stage was set for a new kind of war, one where strategy, diplomacy, and military might would be tested to their limits. Humanity was at a crossroads. Would they allow themselves to be driven by the same anger that had fueled their rise to power? Or could they find a way to stay true to the ideals that had made them stand out in the first place? As the first skirmishes between the UGC and the Ascendants erupted, the galaxy watched, waiting to see what humanity would do next. As the battle for control of the galaxy intensified, the United Galactic Coalition found itself at a pivotal moment in its history. The Ascendants, emboldened by their success in the attack on the lunar forge, were moving quickly to rally more factions to their cause. The first move had been a dramatic one, showing the galaxy that they could strike directly at humanity's heart, and now, the galaxy's response would determine the course of the next war. For humanity, the consequences of that attack were far-reaching. The destruction of the lunar forge was not just a military loss, it was a blow to human pride. The forge had been a symbol of their technological innovation, their ability to create advanced weaponry and spaceships that had helped them defeat the Krakener. Losing it sent a clear message: the Ascendants were capable of breaking through humanity's defenses, and worse, they were willing to make humanity bleed. But humanity had something the Ascendants hadn't anticipated: resilience. The attack on the forge galvanized the human spirit. The people of Earth, and humanity's colonies throughout the galaxy, were not content to simply lie down and accept defeat. They were ready to fight back, to show the galaxy once again that they were not a species to be underestimated. General Stroud, who had previously been more focused on maintaining the peace, now found herself commanding humanity's forces in a time of war. Her military leadership was crucial. She knew that in this battle, the outcome wouldn't just be decided by strength, but by strategic thinking, quick adaptability, and a willingness to take risks that others wouldn't. New tactics, new front lines. In the aftermath of the attack, humanity wasted no time in restructuring their military. Every major faction within the UGC was asked to contribute, pooling their resources and knowledge to form a united front against the Ascendants. The Zillar, with their mastery of psychic warfare, provided invaluable intelligence, while the Tesseril, with their keen minds and telekinetic abilities, helped to train human troops in new, unconventional tactics. The Renathi used their deep knowledge of subspace technology to create new, faster-than-light travel routes that would allow humanity's fleet to strike quickly and decisively against Ascendant strongholds. Despite the growing alliances, however, the fractures within the UGC were beginning to show. The Praxians, ever cautious and isolationist, had begun to question whether humanity's thirst for retribution might once again lead the galaxy into a cycle of violence. Humanity, the Praxian leaders declared, has proven itself capable of great destruction. But can it also show restraint? Their voices were growing louder in the council, and the idea of pulling back from the conflict to seek diplomacy instead of open war was becoming a rallying cry for some. Humanity's own leaders, particularly Ambassador Jackson Hale, found themselves caught in a moral bind. They knew that the Ascendants had to be stopped, but the very nature of their enemies, ruthless, calculating, and insidious, made it difficult to find a clear path forward. The stakes had shifted. The battle for survival was no longer just about fending off an external threat. It had become about defining the future of humanity in the galaxy. The tipping point. It was at this moment of internal struggle that the Ascendants, sensing humanity's hesitation, struck again. They began to target key trade routes, crippling vital supply chains between UGC member species. But their attacks were not just military, they were psychological. The Ascendants began leaking false information about human actions during the Crackener War, portraying humanity as an empire-building species, intent on subjugating weaker species under its rule. This misinformation campaign sowed seeds of doubt in the minds of the UGC's members, exacerbating the tensions that had already begun to rise. In particular, the Veldari, a race known for their brilliant and manipulative minds, played a significant role in fanning the flames of distrust. Their PsyOps division began planting false memories and visions in the minds of key UGC leaders, making them question whether humanity's motivations were as pure as they seemed. The Veldari's ability to manipulate perception through advanced mental techniques meant that it became increasingly difficult to discern truth from illusion. Paranoia spread like wildfire throughout the coalition, and soon, even allies were turning on each other. General Stroud understood the situation all too well. The Ascendants weren't just fighting humanity, they were fighting the very fabric of trust that held the galaxy together. With each passing day, the UGC was splintering. Humanity's allies were retreating into themselves, too afraid of the growing chaos to continue their support. The only faction that remained steadfast in their alliance with humanity was the Zillar, whose leaders had seen the strength of humanity in the face of the Crackener War. They were prepared to stand by humanity, but even their support might not be enough if the rest of the galaxy turned its back on the UGC. Ambassador Hale's gamble. It was clear that the UGC needed to do something drastic if they were going to stop the Ascendants from winning the war through manipulation. Ambassador Jackson Hale, taking matters into his own hands, called for an emergency meeting between the remaining UGC members. His plan was audacious, a final gambit that he hoped could unite the galaxy's fractured factions by exposing the Ascendants for the threat they truly were. "I've been to the edge of this galaxy," Hale said, standing before the council. "And I've seen the truth of it. There are no more neutral players. There are no more bystanders. Either we unite against the Ascendants now, or we face the consequences of their manipulation. The galaxy will never be the same if we don't stop them." In a bold move, Hale suggested that humanity would go on the offensive not just to fight the Ascendants, but to expose their plans to every corner of the galaxy. He called for a daring infiltration of the Ascendants' headquarters and operation to bring the truth to light. The Ascendants had hidden their true intentions under layers of deceit, but Hale's plan was simple: show the galaxy who the true enemy was. To carry out the mission, humanity's forces would need to combine their most skilled operatives from all corners of the galaxy. This meant relying on former enemies' factions that had once been suspicious of humanity, but who might now find common cause in the face of the Ascendant threat. The last stand. The mission was risky, but the stakes had never been higher. Hale, Stroud, and their team of human operatives began preparing for the most dangerous operation humanity had ever attempted. Meanwhile, the Zillar and the Renethys sent covert support, providing psychic shielding and advanced technologies that would be crucial in infiltrating the Ascendants' heavily guarded strongholds. The plan was simple in its brilliance: get in, find the Ascendant leaders, and expose them to the galaxy. The evidence they would uncover would prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Ascendants had been behind the attacks on humanity and show the galaxy that the Ascendants' vision of empire was nothing more than a path to domination.